welcome, I'm the legendary Pokemaster, and today we are talking about a place in the Alola region, Exeggutor Island. The plot brings you here, but it kinda isn't really elaborated upon, while there are a lot of questions that you can actually have about this place. So hopefully we're gonna answer a few of those questions today in this video. With that said, without further ado, let's start. Before we start, we should probably take a look at the history of Exeggutor Island and its geography for future reference. In both of the games, the protagonist goes to Exeggutor Island for either the Sun or Moon Flute, depending on their game, which is needed to awaken Solgaleo or Lunala, respectively. These are held on a pedestal at the highest elevation of the island, which is stated to be extremely old in the games. As for geography itself, there are two halves, the lower and upper parts, the lower containing mostly fields for catching wild Pokemon, as well as the namesake walking memes. It also has what I like to call Cutscene Cave, because the only reason it exists is for that one cutscene in Sun and Moon, making it basically a vestigial structure in the newer games. But hey, it has a big pearl, so I'm not complaining. The upper part is basically a small hill and only really has that pedestal. This section also has obstructed access from the lower level, which is where the dock for the boat is. With all of this in mind, we have our first question about this place. What's that trial everybody's talking about? Supposedly the island used to be a trial site, so who was the captain and what was the general setup? Well, there are a few possible candidates for trial captain. The first one that came to mind is Mullane, because he directly kinda said that he used to be a captain. He's the steel type specialist who's the cousin of Sophocles. However, his trial was probably at the observatory, seeing that Sophocles' trial is here, that being his successor and cousin. Also, since Exeggutor Island isn't really the proper setting for a steel type trial, this probably is not true. The next person who I thought could have been a trial captain was Hapu's grandfather. Considering that Hapu said that he was a kahuna of the island, however, he would have needed to ascend to that position. This honestly seems pretty reasonable. If the kahuna of Poni Island, it being so sparsely inhabited, stepped down, the only real person to be qualified would most likely be one of the trial captains. The only thing that doesn't match up is that the grandfather was most likely a ground type specialist, as Hapu is one. Something that once again doesn't really go great with the theme set on the island. But other than that, so far this seems like the best possible choice. The final possibility that I figured was potentially the twin sisters of Lena, those being Harper and Sarah, who are both water type specialists. I thought this because the type matches up with the setting, Exeggutor Island being, you guessed it, an island, which is surrounded by water, and also it rains a lot. So that helps, I guess. The thing with this, though, is the sisters' ages. This would technically allow them to be the trial captains, but it couldn't have been very long ago considering their age. So overall, the best bet is probably the grandfather or some unknown guy who's not in the plot. Moving on, the trial layout. Get ready for some pure speculation. Okay, so basically, I guess there would be some memes here, and you'd have battled them or something, and maybe that's because you need to get something from them for the totem Pokemon, like pie or something. Then you have to go up this rampish thing here, and there are more Pokemon, maybe like Pinsir from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And then the trial captain slapped something together at the top to call the totem Pokemon. As for that, I don't know what that could be. Unless you want to say it's another Exeggutor, it could basically be any Pokemon that remotely relates to the setting. So I'll just say it's like two canon, because they probably want to show that off. Okay, so the next question. Why are the Sun and Moon Flutes housed here of all places? Before we consider the flutes, we need to consider their power, which is still considering the flutes, I guess. These have the power to summon Solgaleo and Lunala, as I said, Pokemon that, as Gladion put it, have the power to summon such terrifyingly powerful creatures that it could be equivalent to the apocalypse or something. After using these flutes, which were implied to have been used in the past to devastating consequence, it's natural that the people of Alola would not want the Ultra Beasts summoned by the flutes to ever come back. So they sent them to remote corners of the region as to be safeguarded from the people who could use them in a bad way. This secret must have been kept only by those deemed worthy, aka the trial captains and kahunas, seeing that they're the only ones who seem to know about it. This may also be the reason why the trial site was abandoned, because they didn't want the general public so close to this dangerous relic. So they made it a wildlife sanctuary as it is seen in Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which would prevent people from traveling to the island under normal circumstances and stumbling upon the Sun or Moon Flute. My last question is, what type of Z Crystal would be given for this trial? Well, to nail that, we need to predict what type of Pokemon you'd fight here. Naturally, there are Exeggutor, the grass types, but something tips me off that this is a better place for a water type trial than a grass type trial. A grass trial would have a hard time here because there's not much space to do stuff. However, you know where there is space to do stuff? The ocean. And that surrounds the island. They could much more easily make a water-type trial here involving surfing mechanics. Also, Lena's trial site seems to be a temporary one in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, her seemingly being there for just a recent disturbance of wishy-washy. On the other hand, Mallow's trial seems to be permanently situated, and even basically has its own road leading just to the trial site. So I personally think that this place was the original site of obtaining the Waterium Z. Another possibility includes the Pinsir on the island. That may hint at a previous bug-type trial here, and that would make sense because the Bugium Z is not not actually obtained by a trial captain in the game, rather Guzma. If you actually think about it, this is a prime spot for a bug-type trial. Basically, that whole thing in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon with the Exeggutor being attacked by the Pinsir would be the first part of the trial, and then all you need to do is add in some totem Pokemon at the top of the island. Maybe Guzma was even the trial captain. He did say in the games that he wanted to be one, so maybe he opened one illegally on this island and it got shut down. I'd consider it just as safe of a bet as the Waterium Z. That's basically my last question, but I also did want to point out something that I observed about the Exeggutor and Pinsir on the island. The Exeggutor have adapted to suit the island with their own Alola form, while the Pinsir have not, and also the Pinsir are seen bothering the native Exeggutor. This may mean that Pinsir was either an invasive or introduced species of Pokemon to the island, and may also provide evidence as to why the people abandoned the island. They didn't want to cause any further harm by more introduced species. Or it could be, like I said before, a bug-type trial captain bringing bug types to the island for their trial, which would explain why they're not adapted, because they were artificially introduced. And then he left him there. Because that's the way you do things, I guess. But anyway, Exeggutor Island is, kind of ironically, one of the most mysterious places of Alola. And with that said, there are probably a few questions I did not cover about the island, so what do you think? What are your questions about the island, and do you have any possible answers? Please leave a comment down below. You can also subscribe to see videos like this twice a week. Regardless, Pinsir is very introduced, and I will see you in the next video.